Right now, in March of 2026, something is happening that nobody, and I mean absolutely nobody, saw coming. Blueface is co-parenting on camera. Let that sink in for a moment. This is the same man who turned the entire rap world sideways with Thoshiana back in 2018. The same man whose offbeat flow became either the most infectious or the most infuriating thing you had ever heard, depending on which side of the internet you lived on. The same man who became just as famous for the chaos in his personal life as he ever was for any song he released. The same man who spent 21 grueling months behind bars in the California prison system, separated from his children, separated from the world, separated from everything. The same man who, just weeks ago, announced that he has a fourth baby on the way with his new girlfriend, Nevaeh Akira. And yet here he is, sitting in a car, with his ex-girlfriend, Jaidyn Alexis. Their 2 children buckled into the back seat. A live stream rolling for the entire world to witness. And a conversation about co-parenting that spiraled into one of the most brutally honest, deeply uncomfortable, and unexpectedly profound exchanges we have seen from any public figure in a very, very long time. They talked about what it means to raise children when the relationship is over. They talked about boundaries. They talked about the confusion that children experience when the adults in their lives cannot get their story straight. They talked about other relationships and what those relationships look like through a child's eyes. And then Blueface said something about therapy that made the entire internet lose its collective mind. The clips have been circulating non-stop. Every commentary channel, every reaction page, every podcast. Everyone has something to say about what happened during this live stream. But here is the thing that I need you to understand before we go a single step further. The clips are not giving you the full picture. They are not even giving you half of the picture. They are giving you the most inflammatory, the most clickable, the most algorithmically optimized fragments of a conversation that deserves to be understood in its entirety. And that is exactly what we are going to do right now. We are going to break down every layer of this situation. The history, the context, the relationships, the children, the psychology behind what was said and, more importantly, what was left unsaid. We are going to talk about why Blueface co-parenting philosophy is both admirable and deeply flawed. We are going to talk about why Jaden's pushback was more insightful than most people are giving her credit for. And we're going to talk about what all of this means, not just for these 2 people and their children, but for an entire generation of young parents who are trying to figure out how to raise kids in an era where everything is content, everything is public, and the line between real life and performance has never been thinner. But before we dive into all of that, make sure you leave a like and subscribe. I am not just saying that to say it. This kind of long-form, in-depth content does not get pushed by the algorithm. The algorithm wants short clips and hot takes. It wants outrage. It wants you to watch for 15 seconds and move on. What it does not want is a 40-minute deep dive into the nuances of co-parenting, mental health stigma, and the psychology of fatherhood in the social media age. So if you want to see more content like this, the single best thing you can do is hit that like button and subscribe. It tells the algorithm that this matters. And I genuinely believe that this conversation matters. Because what is really happening here is not just 2 celebrities arguing in a car. What is really happening here is a window into how an entire generation is trying, sometimes succeeding, sometimes failing spectacularly, to figure out what it means to raise children after everything has fallen apart. After the relationship has ended. After trust has been broken. After new partners have entered the picture. After prison. After public humiliation. After all of it. And that is a conversation worth having. So let us get into it. If you are just now tuning into the Blueface saga, or if you have only been following through scattered clips on your timeline, I need to bring you up to speed. Because the conversation that happened on this live stream does not exist in a vacuum. It is the product of over a decade of history, multiple relationships, legal battles, public feuds, and a level of personal chaos that would be difficult to script even if someone tried. So let us start from the very beginning. Blueface, whose real name is Jonathan Jamal Porter, was born on January 20th, 1997, in Los Angeles, California. He grew up in a fractured household. His parents were not together. He spent portions of his childhood living with his mother in Santa Clarita, a relatively quiet suburban community north of Los Angeles, and other portions living with his father up in Oakland. That back and forth, that constant shuffling between two worlds, two households, two sets of rules, two entirely different environments, shaped him in ways that are still visible today. You can hear it in the way he talks about fatherhood. You can see it in the choices he makes about how he wants to be present for his own children. And you can feel it in the raw, almost desperate sincerity with which he argues for his version of co-parenting, even when that version is riddled with contradictions. Blueface burst onto the music scene in 2018. Thoshiana was the track that made him a household name. That unconventional, deliberately offbeat flow, landing his words in places where they technically should not have been, became one of the most divisive stylistic choices in modern hip-hop. Some people loved it. Some people despised it. But everybody was talking about it. The song charted. The remixes piled up. And overnight, Jonathan Porter became Blueface, one of the most recognizable and polarizing young rappers in the game. But the music was only ever half the story. Maybe even less than half. Because from the very beginning of his public career, Blueface's personal life commanded just as much attention as his artistry. And at the center of that personal life, long before any of the fame, was Jaidyn Alexis. Blueface and Jaden go all the way back. We are talking middle school, 8th grade. The two of them grew up together, dated through high school, went to prom together. The whole classic American young love story. They were connected long before Thoshiana ever existed. Long before the record deals, the viral moments, the controversies. Jaden knew Jonathan before the world knew Blueface. And together they have 2 children. Their son, Javaughn, was born in April of 2017. That means as of right now, in March of 2026, that boy is closing in on his 9th birthday. He is not a toddler anymore. He is not a little kid who does not understand what is happening around him. He is a nearly 9-year-old who can read, who can access the internet, who has classmates and friends who also have access to the internet, and who is, by his own father's admission, incredibly observant. We will come back to that point later, because it becomes one of the most important threads in this entire conversation. Their daughter, Journey, who the internet has affectionately nicknamed Pink Face because of her obsession with the color pink, turned 3 recently. She is at that age where personality is just exploding out of every interaction. She is verbal, she is opinionated, she is fearless, and based on what we saw on this live stream, she is absolutely running the household regardless of which parent she is with. Now, here is where the layers start to stack. Because Blueface's family situation does not begin and end with Jaden. There is also Chrisian Rock. For those who may have somehow avoided this particular corner of internet culture, Chrisian Rock, born Chrisian Malone, also known as Jaden Blue, became entangled with Blueface in what can only be described as one of the most volatile, publicly documented relationships in modern celebrity history. The fights, the social media posts, the tattoos, the reality television appearances, the legal issues, all of it played out in real time on camera, on platforms, for millions of people to consume as entertainment. And from that relationship came Chrisian Jr., Blueface's 3rd child. So even before this latest pregnancy announcement, Blueface was already navigating fatherhood across 2 different households with 2 different women who have a publicly contentious relationship with each other. And then came the prison sentence. In January of 2024, Blueface turned himself in for a probation violation connected to a 2021 assault case. The judge sentenced him to 4 years. 4 years. And while he was ultimately released after serving approximately 21 months, walking out on November 2nd, 2025, the impact of that time cannot be overstated. 21 months. Think about what 21 months means in the life of a child. When Blueface went in, Javaughn was roughly 7 years old. When he came out, that boy was approaching 9. That is a massive developmental window. That is the window where children begin to form more complex understandings of relationships, of trust, of family dynamics. That is the window where they start to notice inconsistencies between what adults say and what adults do. When Blueface went in, Journey was barely a toddler. When he came out, she was a fully verbal, personality-driven 3-year-old with opinions about everything from slushy flavors to what constitutes acceptable language in a moving vehicle. He missed all of that. He missed the first words, the first steps, the birthdays, the bedtimes, the random Tuesday afternoons that do not feel important in the moment but are actually the fabric of a childhood. And when he came home, the chaos did not pause to let him catch his breath. Within hours of his release, the internet was already churning. Jaden and Chrisian Rock were exchanging words online. The commentary channels were already positioning their cameras. The content machine was already grinding. But through all of that noise, through all of the drama and the headlines and the social media warfare, something shifted. Something that most people did not notice because it was not as loud as the arguments. It was not as clickable as the feuds. Blueface started showing up. Not perfectly. Not without flaws. Not without saying things that made people cringe or shake their heads. But he started showing up. And this live stream, this car ride with Jaden and the kids, is the clearest, most unfiltered example of what that showing up looks like in practice. And now, just to add one more layer to an already impossibly layered situation. On February 22, 2026, Blueface and his new girlfriend Nevaeh Akira announced during a Twitch stream that Nevaeh is pregnant. They are expecting a boy. The name they have chosen is Solar Porter. So as of this moment, Blueface is a father of 3 with a 4th on the way, connected to 3 different women, freshly released from a 21-month prison sentence, attempting to rebuild his career, and trying to co-parent on a public live stream. That is the full context. That is the picture you need to have in your mind as we move into the next section. Because without that context, the conversation on this live stream is just noise. With it, it becomes something far more complicated and far more human than the clips are showing you. Now that you have the full backdrop, let us get into the actual substance of what was said during this live stream. Because the surface-level clips that are circulating right now, the ones being shared and memed and debated in comment sections across every platform, those clips are doing what clips always do. They are stripping away nuance in favor of engagement. They are giving you the most provocative 10 seconds while ignoring the 30 minutes of context that surrounded those 10 seconds. So let us do what the clips refuse to do. Let us actually sit with this conversation and unpack it properly. Blueface co-parenting philosophy. The foundational statement that Blueface made during this stream, the one that frames everything else, is this: I think co-parenting is us existing all in one room. He then drew a sharp distinction that a lot of people glossed over. He said, if we just take the kids separately, we're just separately parenting. That is not a throwaway line. That is a philosophical position on what co-parenting actually means versus what most people practice. And whether you agree with it or not, it is worth engaging with seriously. What Blueface is arguing is that true co-parenting requires physical co-presence. It is not enough, in his view, to simply divide time. To say, you take the kids on Monday through Wednesday, I'll take them Thursday through Saturday. That model, to him, is not co-parenting. It is parallel parenting. It is 2 people doing the same job in 2 different locations without ever actually doing it together. His model is different. His model says, we sit in the same car. We go to the same park. We eat at the same McDonald's. We let the kids see that even though mom and dad are not a couple, they can still occupy the same space with warmth, with humor, with what he calls love. Not romantic love, but familial love. The love of 2 people who share children and have chosen, despite everything, to be present together for those children. And when Jaden pushed back, when she said, a lot of people do it that way, referring to the more traditional separated co-parenting model, Blueface did not waver. He said, yeah, they do. But it's not my style. And then came the moment that, for me, reframed the entire conversation. He connected it to his own childhood. He talked about how when he was a kid, he liked it when his dad would come to his house and hang out with him. Not pick him up and take him somewhere else. Not shuttle him back and forth. But actually come to where he was, exist in his space, and be present. That detail matters enormously, because it tells us that Blueface co-parenting philosophy is not something he invented for content. It is not a performance. It is rooted in a very specific childhood memory. The memory of a boy whose parents were separated, who experienced the fragmentation of being passed between two worlds, and who held on to the rare moments when those worlds briefly came back together. That is the emotional foundation underneath everything else he said during this stream. And without understanding that foundation, you cannot fully understand why he is so insistent on this particular approach to co-parenting, even when it creates complications that he seems either unwilling or unable to fully acknowledge. Now, here is where things start to get genuinely difficult. Because Jaden did not just sit there and nod along. She asked the question that anyone watching with any degree of critical thinking was already asking in their head. Jaden's challenge. The confusion question. She said to him, directly and without hesitation, "Don't you think it confuses them if they go on YouTube and they see you doing that with someone else?" This is not a rhetorical question. This is not a hypothetical. This is a mother looking at the father of her children and asking him to reconcile two realities that, from the outside, appear fundamentally irreconcilable. Because here is the situation as it actually exists. Blueface is on this live stream, in this car, with Jaden and their kids, being affectionate, being warm, being present, being what he describes as a co-parenting unit. And simultaneously, he is in a relationship with Nevaeh Akira. He is having another baby with Nevaeh Akira. He is publicly committed to Nevaeh Akira in ways that are documented and accessible to anyone with an internet connection. So when Javaughn, who is almost 9, who is what Blueface himself describes as very observant, gets on YouTube and sees his dad in one video hugging his mom and playing family, and in another video announcing a pregnancy with a completely different woman, what exactly is that child supposed to do with that information? How does a nearly 9-year-old brain process those two realities simultaneously without experiencing confusion, without developing questions that no one in his life seems prepared to answer? Jaden is asking the most important question that could possibly be asked in this scenario. And Blueface's response is telling. He says, "Not at all. I don't think so at all. I think that's your personal feelings coming up." Now, I need to sit with that response for a moment, and I need you to sit with it too. There are multiple ways to interpret what Blueface said here, and I think the honest interpretation is that several of these are happening simultaneously. The first interpretation is deflection. By framing Jaden's concern as your personal feelings, Blueface is shifting the conversation away from the children and toward Jaden's emotional state. He is essentially saying, this is not about the kids being confused, this is about you being jealous, or hurt, or uncomfortable with my new relationship. That reframing allows him to dismiss the substance of her concern without actually engaging with it. The second interpretation is genuine belief. It is possible, and I think probable, that Blueface sincerely believes children can distinguish between different types of love. That a child seeing mom and dad together and happy is a fundamentally different category of experience than a child seeing dad with a romantic partner. In Blueface's mind, love for the mother of your children and romantic love for your partner are two completely separate things. And children are capable of understanding that distinction. The third interpretation is the one that I think is the most psychologically interesting and also the most concerning. And that is the possibility that Blueface himself has not fully processed the contradiction in his own behavior. That he has not sat with the reality of what it looks like from the outside, because sitting with that reality would require him to acknowledge that his co-parenting philosophy, as beautiful as it sounds in theory, creates genuine complications in practice. And acknowledging those complications would mean acknowledging that he might need to adjust his approach. And adjusting his approach might mean giving up the thing that makes him feel most like a good father, which is being physically present with Jaden and the kids in the same space. I believe all three of these interpretations are operating at the same time. Blueface is deflecting. He is genuinely convinced of his position, and he has not done the internal work necessary to see the full picture. And that combination, conviction without introspection, is exactly why the next part of the conversation became the most controversial moment of the entire stream. The therapy bombshell. When the topic of therapy came up, Blueface delivered a statement that sent shockwaves across the internet. And I want to give you his exact words, because the exact words matter. He said, "I think therapy is for weak-minded individuals." He followed that up with, "You need somebody else to tell you what's right and what's wrong. We're adults. We know what's right and what's wrong. Therapy is for kids." Now, the internet heard those words and responded with a level of fury that was both entirely predictable and entirely justified. In 2026, mental health awareness is not a niche conversation anymore. It is mainstream. It is cultural. It is personal for millions of people who have benefited from therapy, who have had their lives saved by therapy, who have learned to understand themselves through therapy. And for a man with a platform as large as Blueface to stand in front of millions of people and characterize therapy as a sign of weakness, that is not just a bad take. It is a harmful one. And I want to be absolutely clear about this. Blueface is wrong. He is unambiguously, categorically wrong. Therapy is not for the weak-minded. Therapy is, in fact, one of the most difficult and courageous undertakings a human being can commit to. It requires a willingness to be vulnerable, a willingness to examine your own patterns, your own trauma, your own blind spots, a willingness to sit in a room with another person and say, "I do not have all the answers, and I need help finding them." That is not weakness. That is strength of the highest order. But, and this is the part that I think the outrage machine is missing, Blueface's statement, as wrong as it is, did not emerge from a vacuum. It has a context. And that context is important not because it excuses the statement, but because it explains it. And understanding why someone believes something harmful is the first step toward helping them move past it. Blueface just spent 21 months inside the California prison system. If you know anything about the mental health resources available to inmates in the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, you know that the picture is bleak. Overcrowded facilities, understaffed mental health departments, wait lists that stretch for months, a culture within the prison system that actively punishes displays of vulnerability, an environment where showing weakness, real or perceived, can have immediate and dangerous consequences. In that environment, the only mental health resource most inmates have is themselves, their own mind, their own willpower, their own ability to compartmentalize, to suppress, to endure. You wake up every day and you figure it out on your own, because there is no one coming to help you figure it out. You do not get to sit on a comfortable couch and talk about your feelings for an hour. You get a concrete cell and your own thoughts. And if your own thoughts are not strong enough to carry you through, then you are in trouble. When a person spends 21 months in that environment and then comes out and says, "I think therapy is for weak-minded individuals," what they are really saying, even if they do not have the language to articulate it this way, is, "The only thing that got me through was my own strength, and I am terrified of what it would mean to admit that my own strength might not be enough." That is not an excuse. That is a diagnosis. That is a man who has been conditioned by an extraordinarily harsh environment to equate self-reliance with survival, and to equate asking for help with vulnerability, and to equate vulnerability with danger. And those equations, once they are wired into your psyche by months and years of institutional reinforcement, do not disappear because someone on the internet tells you that therapy is actually good. This is, perhaps, the cruelest irony in the entire conversation. Blueface's resistance to therapy is itself one of the strongest possible arguments for why he needs therapy. The walls he has built around his emotional world, walls that were probably necessary for survival inside prison, are now preventing him from accessing the tools that would make him a better father, a better co-parent, and a healthier human being. He is trapped behind defenses that once protected him but now imprison him in a different way. And here is where Jaden truly impressed me. Because her response to Blueface's therapy comments demonstrated a level of emotional intelligence and maturity that deserves far more recognition than it has received. When Blueface declared therapy was for the weak-minded, Jaden did not blow up. She did not match his energy. She did not resort to personal attacks or dramatic reactions designed to generate clips. She simply said, "No, it's not. It's for adults too." And then she added something that was genuinely insightful. You just have to be accepting of it. If you're not accepting of it, then it's not going to be beneficial. That statement reveals a sophisticated understanding of how therapeutic intervention actually works. Therapy is not a passive process where you show up and get fixed. It requires active engagement. It requires openness. It requires a willingness to be challenged, to sit with discomfort, to have your assumptions questioned. If you walk into a therapist's office with your walls up, with your mind already made up that the process is worthless, then the process will indeed be worthless. Not because therapy does not work, but because you have preemptively sabotaged your own ability to benefit from it. Jaden sees the cycle clearly. Blueface believes therapy does not work. Because he believes it does not work, he would enter therapy in a defensive, closed-off state. Because he would be defensive and closed off, the therapy would in fact not work for him. And because it did not work, he would feel validated in his original belief that it was pointless. It is a perfect, self-reinforcing loop. A self-fulfilling prophecy of the most textbook variety. And Jaden recognizes that she cannot break that loop for him. She cannot force insight onto someone who is not ready to receive it. She can push back. She can state her position. She can model a different way of thinking. But ultimately, the decision to open that door has to come from Blueface himself. That dynamic. One person seeing clearly what the other person cannot, and knowing that clarity cannot be transferred through argument alone, is one of the most painfully relatable aspects of this entire conversation. Anyone who has ever loved someone who refused to get help knows exactly what that feels like. The children in the room. Now let us talk about what happened with the kids during this stream, because this is where the theoretical debates about co-parenting philosophy meet the concrete reality of actual childhood. Javaughn is almost 9. And Blueface's description of him during the stream was remarkably perceptive. He said, "He's a Taurus. Very stubborn, very emotional, very quiet, very observant. Whether or not you put stock in astrology is irrelevant here. What matters is the substance of the observation." Blueface is describing a child who processes internally. A child who does not broadcast his feelings. A child who watches, absorbs, catalogues, and draws conclusions silently. When Blueface tried to engage him in conversation on the stream, asking about school, about friends, about what was going on in his life, Javaughn responded with one-word answers. Short. Clipped. The classic not quite preteen energy of a kid who is not ignoring you but is also not going to give you more than the bare minimum. And Blueface recognized what was happening. He said, "That's why I be trying to talk to him, ask a question, see what he's thinking. I know he's always thinking." I want to pause on this moment because it reveals something important about Blueface that complicates the easy narrative of him as an ignorant, emotionally stunted individual. This is a man who has correctly identified that his son is an internal processor, that the silence is not emptiness, it is activity, that behind those one-word answers is a mind that is constantly observing, constantly evaluating, constantly forming judgments about the world and the people in it. For a man who just declared therapy to be for the weak-minded, that is an astonishingly emotionally intelligent observation. And the contradiction between that observation and his therapy stance is almost painful in its clarity. He can see the interior emotional life of his child with remarkable precision. But he cannot, or will not, apply that same perceptive lens to his own interior emotional life. And here is where we loop back to Jaden's question about YouTube. Because if Javaughn is truly as observant as Blueface says he is, and everything we saw on the stream confirms that he is, then this child is absolutely, without question, processing the dissonance between what he sees on family days and what he sees online. He is watching his father be warm and present and affectionate with his mother in the car, and he is also aware, at some level, that his father has a girlfriend, that his father's girlfriend is pregnant, that the family unit he experiences on these co-parenting days is not the complete picture of his father's life. A nearly 9-year-old who is very observant, and always thinking, is doing math in his head that the adults around him may not realize he is capable of doing. And the results of that math, the conclusions he is drawing, the models of relationships and family and love that he is constructing, those results are being shaped by everything he witnesses, both in person and online. And then there is Journey. Pink face. 3 years old and operating at a level of chaotic confidence that is genuinely delightful to watch. The moment she got in that car, the entire atmosphere shifted. She demanded a pink slushie with the authority of someone who has never been told no and does not intend to start accepting that word now. She called the cameraman a booty head. She called Blueface a rude monkey. And Blueface was absolutely thrilled by every second of it. He said, "See, that's why I like you, dude. You be speaking your truth." And watching those moments, watching Journey boss the entire car around, watching Blueface laugh with genuine, uncomplicated joy at his daughter's personality, watching Jaden shake her head and smile. Those moments are, without question, the strongest argument in favor of Blueface co-parenting philosophy. Because those kids looked happy. Genuinely, uncomplicatedly happy. They looked comfortable in that car, in that configuration, with both of their parents present. There was no visible tension between Blueface and Jaden when the children were in the space. No passive-aggressive comments. No loaded silences. No walking on eggshells. It was just two parents and two kids going to McDonald's, going to Walmart, going to the park. Normal family stuff. Unremarkable in its ordinariness. And that ordinariness, that boring, beautiful normalcy, is precisely what children need most. McDonald's. A trip to Walmart for supplies. The park. Javaughn shooting basketball with his dad while Journey played with her Mario toys on the grass nearby. These are not extraordinary moments. They are the kind of moments that form the bedrock of a childhood. And Blueface, whatever his flaws, whatever his blind spots, was there for them. But, and this is the tension that makes this entire situation so difficult to evaluate neatly, those moments were also being live-streamed to millions of people in real time. And that fact introduces a variable that fundamentally changes the equation in ways that neither Blueface nor Jaden may fully appreciate. The elephant in the room. Nevaeh, and the limits of philosophy. Everything we have discussed so far exists against a backdrop that cannot be ignored. Blueface is in a relationship with Nevaeh Akira. Nevaeh is pregnant with his 4th child. And that reality introduces complications into his co-parenting philosophy that his philosophy, as currently constructed, simply cannot accommodate. When Blueface says co-parenting means coexisting in front of our children and showing them that we at least have love for each other, the immediate question becomes, love defined how? And perceived how? Not by Blueface, who presumably understands the nuances of his own emotional landscape. Not by Jaden, who has enough context and maturity to understand the distinction between familial love and romantic love. But by the children. By Javaughn. By Journey, eventually. By the audience of millions watching in real time. How is the love being performed on this live stream different from the love being performed with Nevaeh? And who gets to make that distinction? The adults performing it, or the children trying to interpret it? Blueface attempted to address this indirectly with what has become known as the power in numbers analogy. And I will be honest with you. It did not work. He tried to argue that if one person is running on a highway, they look crazy, but if 10 people are running on a highway, it is a marathon. The intended point, I believe, was something about collective action reframing individual behavior, that what looks chaotic in isolation looks purposeful in community. Jaden was not buying it. She responded, "One crazy person is better than 10 crazy people." The chat agreed with her overwhelmingly, and the analogy died the death it deserved. But underneath that clumsy metaphor, I believe Blueface was reaching for something he does not quite have the vocabulary to express. He was trying to articulate that unity, even imperfect, messy, contradictory unity, has inherent value. That the family unit, even when it is fractured and reconfigured and unconventional, is worth preserving in whatever form it can take. That being present and flawed is better than being absent and unblemished. That showing up imperfectly is superior to not showing up at all. And there is something real in that. Something worth taking seriously, even if the packaging is rough. Because here is what Blueface said that, for me, crystallized his entire worldview on this subject. He looked at the camera and laid it out plainly. We're going to have a family day as usual. This is how we co-parent. Everybody does it differently. My version of co-parenting is us coexisting in front of our children. Our children seeing that we at least have love for each other even if we don't agree, like each other, or want to be with each other. He continued, I think it's very important for our children to see their mom and their dad at the same time rather than separately. Read that again. Read the qualifier he put in there, even if we don't agree, like each other, or want to be with each other. That is a man who is openly admitting that this arrangement is not comfortable for him. That spending the day with his ex-girlfriend on camera, while navigating the complexities of a new relationship and an impending fourth child, is not something he would choose for his own comfort. He is choosing it for his children. He is choosing discomfort. He is choosing awkwardness. He is choosing the potential for misinterpretation and public scrutiny and internet judgment. And he is choosing all of that because he believes, rightly or wrongly, wisely or naively, that his children benefit from seeing their parents together. And Jaidyn, to her credit, acknowledged it. She said, I guess so. To which Blueface responded, No, you don't guess. And I think that's what it's all about. We got to sacrifice our feelings for our children's feelings. We got to sacrifice our feelings for our children's feelings. There are parents with perfect marriages and no criminal records and advanced degrees in child psychology who have never articulated that principle as clearly as Blueface just did while sitting in a car eating McDonald's on a live stream. And that is what makes this whole thing so maddeningly complicated. Because the man who just said something genuinely beautiful about parental sacrifice is the same man who called therapy weak-minded. The man who identified his son's internal emotional world with remarkable precision is the same man who cannot see his own blind spots. The man who is choosing discomfort for the sake of his children is the same man who is about to have a fourth child with a third woman while his eldest is approaching an age where all of these dynamics will become impossible to shield him from. It is all true at the same time. The beauty and the mess. The insight and the ignorance. The love and the chaos. All of it, simultaneously. And that simultaneity is what makes this situation so compelling and so important to discuss beyond the surface level of viral clips and hot takes. So where does this all go from here? Because there are real implications to everything we just watched. First, the co-parenting dynamic between Blueface and Jaden is going to get exponentially more complicated. Nevaeh is pregnant. That baby is coming. And when Solar Porter arrives, the math changes. Blueface will be splitting his time between 3 baby mothers. Jaden, Chrisian Rock, and Nevaeh. 3 different households. 3 different sets of expectations. 3 different children who all want and deserve their father's time. And you can already see the cracks forming. Just weeks ago, Blueface made headlines for asking Javaughn on a live stream whether he's into boys or girls. Jaden shut that down immediately. And she was right to. That's not a live stream conversation. That's a private conversation. And the fact that Blueface doesn't seem to understand where the camera should stop rolling. That's a problem. A real problem. Because these kids are growing up on the internet. Every argument their parents have is being clipped, commented on, and memed. Every family day is content. Every car ride is a vlog. And at some point, those children are going to be old enough to Google their own names. And everything will be there waiting for them. The co-parenting debates. The therapy comments. The other women. All of it. And this is where I think Blueface's entire philosophy gets tested. Because coexisting in the same room is a beautiful idea in theory. But when the room has a camera in it, and the camera is broadcasting to millions, the rules change. Now, the larger cultural conversation here is important too. Because Blueface is not the only one navigating this. We are watching an entire generation of young parents try to co-parent in the social media age. Where everything is public. Where the court of public opinion is always in session. Where your worst moment as a parent can become a viral clip before you even finish the sentence. And I think that's why this stream resonated with so many people. Because whether you love Blueface or you can't stand him, You probably know someone going through something similar. Maybe without the cameras. Maybe without the millions of followers. But the same fundamental questions. How do we raise kids together when we're not together? How do we show our children love when we're not in love? How do we protect our kids from the fallout of our own choices? Those are universal questions. And Blueface and Jaden just answered them on a live stream while eating McDonald's and going to Walmart. Which is either the most real thing you've ever seen, or the most chaotic. Probably both. And for everyone who heard the therapy comment and wrote Blueface off completely, I'd push back on that a little. Not because he's right. He's not. But because writing someone off for having a bad take is exactly how we make sure they never grow past it. Blueface is 29. He just got out of prison. He's trying to be present for 3 different children. Is he saying dumb things along the way? Yes. But is he showing up? Also yes. And in a world where so many fathers don't show up at all, I think that matters. Even when it's messy. Especially when it's messy. And so now with all of that said, let me know what you think in the comments. What's your take on Blueface co-parenting philosophy? Do you think spending family days together even when you're no longer a couple is the right move for the kids? Or do you agree with Jaden that it sends confusing signals, especially when there's another relationship involved? And what about the therapy comments? Do you think Blueface will ever come around on that? Or is that a mindset that's too deeply rooted to change? And the biggest question of all. With a 4th baby on the way and 3 different mothers in the picture, how long can this version of co-parenting actually last? Let me know your thoughts on all of it. Drop a comment. I read them all. If you made it to this point in the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. It genuinely helps me out more than you know, and I cannot thank you enough for watching. I hope you have an incredible rest of your day. But in the meantime, if you want to see what happened when Blueface's mom got involved in this entire co-parenting situation, because trust me, Carlisa had things to say, well, you're not going to want to miss that one. So check out the suggested video. I'll see you there.